The Chicago aesthetic is grounded in soulfulness. The Chicago aesthetic is grounded in futurism and realism, keeping it 1,000, as they would say. I can always kind of tell a Chicagoan from someone. I think we curse uniquely. I think if you've been cursed out by a Chicagoan, the motherfucker has cursed you out, like, for real.
It's very true. That's a huge misconception.
I would actually agree with that.
I think that's true to some extent.
Oh, not so. I mean, not in our community.
Black folk don't want to hear certain histories.
Especially, I think, as black folks move more into a higher socioeconomic status, they want to detach themselves from history and culture.
That's what colonization is. We're supposed to not know our history.
As a former winner of Know Your Heritage, circa 92, I know my history.
I think Black people do know our history, and it's not always going to look like a textbook. It's not always going to look like what we're fed.
The traditional ones, you know, like the Wheel of Fortune, I call it the RSTLNEs, you know, the basics.
Martin Luther King,
Rosa Parks,
Sojourner Truth,
Harriet Tubman,
George Washington Carver,
Malcolm X.
You get a month growing up in high school, and that's like, you're conditioned to think that that's okay?
If you look in American textbooks, you will find out why not only do black people not know black history, nobody does, because it's just presented as an afterthought.
Our schools don't teach our history, don't teach the real history.
We're wiped from the textbooks, we're wiped from the schools.
There is a law on the books that says that black history must be taught. And it's been on the books for several years, but it's not been implemented.
There was an instance in Texas where the book company stated that the African slaves were like indentured servants instead of stating what they were, actual slaves.
You have generations of children that are coming up in homes where they're not learning about, in Chicago, for example, Harold Washington, the first black mayor. They're not learning about some of our historical figures that have done so much for the black community.
The lesser known people like Bayard Rustin,
W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington,
Fred Hampton.
We're even learning more about the Black Panthers thanks to Beyonce.
I could go on like Lou Palmer we need to know about, and Phil Caron, who was the foundation, played for Sunrise.
Jean-Baptiste Point de Sable, I believe was his full name, was a Haitian explorer that they credit with discovering Chicago.
A. Fuller Randolph was basically the mentor of your civil rights leaders that you mostly hear about. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, those guys.
If people would understand what happened, what the transformation that happened in this country just 50 short years ago in terms of, you know, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all the struggles that we've made over the years, over the decades, it seems like they're being squandered now by this generation. People had to fight for our right just to vote. People had to fight for our right just to sit down in the same restaurants. And so I think if we know more of that history, we would appreciate where we are today.
Our families rarely talk about our history. So the children don't know where they come from. They don't know who their grandfather was. They don't know the businesses that they had back in the days. And that is why we're so lost. That's why our kids are out here doing so many different things that we can't explain, and we love to say, what's wrong with the children? And the thing that is wrong is we don't know our history. We don't know where we came from. We don't know how great we can be.
I think, though, because of the conversations that are happening about racism, that we are seeking these things out. I've seen, like, even myself, like, I find myself, like, Googling things or trying to find it out just because, like, I want more answers than what I'm hearing.
But also the history is truncated. So black folks will know history from slavery until the present, but our history extends beyond slavery, extends prior to the transatlantic slave trade. We existed before our interaction with Europeans. And a lot of times we don't see that part of history. It's as though our history started with the transatlantic slave trade and then ends with President Obama.
Our history begins at the cradle of civilization.
We start as a people. In Ethiopia, we were the pyramids. We were the people who made and brought history and civilization to the whole world. And if we knew that, and if people knew that about us, as it said, they would love us.
There's so much to learn around African history. That's the diaspora as well that spawns the continent, but then in the Americas and Europe and Asia And so I think that there's more for Black people to learn about their history and the different kind of cultures that we've taken on across the globe.
It wasn't until I was in my 30s that I started to explore other aspects of being Black, other cultures, not even Black, just other cultures, period, to know about the world, because there's so much more world out here that, man, so many little Black kids don't even know. They can't even conceptualize it. They can't even think about it.